Call of the roll.
Mrs. Holness, Mr. Bartlett, Mr. Holness, Dr. Clark, Dr. Chang, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Samuda, Ms. Grange, Mrs. Williams, Mrs. Malawu-Fort, Dr. Tufton, Mr. McKenzie, Mr. Chuck, Mr. Vaz, Mr. Warmington, Mr. Charles, Mr. Green, Mr. Morgan, Mr. Hutchinson, Mr. Terry Long, Miss Smith, Dr. Dunn, Mrs. Cuthbert-Flynn, Dr. Dunn, Mrs. Cuthbert-Flynn, Mr. Main, Mr. Davis, Mr. Witter, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brownberg, Dr. Charles, Mr. Chin, Mr. Clark, Mr. Cousins, Ms. Crawford, Ms. Daly, Ms. Davis, Mr. Goldin, Mr. Graham, Dr. Guy, Ms. Hamilton, Ms. Hannah, Mr. Henriquez, Mr. Henry, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Lawrence, Ms. Lee, Mr. Miller, Mr. Montague, Ms. Morrison, Mrs. Nita Garvey, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Siblist, Mr. Slowly, Mrs. Vaz, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Williams, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Wright. Yes, Minister Williams and Mr. Charles. Yes, I got Mr. Green.
Members, as usual, it is my pleasure and privilege to welcome everyone here and those joining us online via YouTube and PBCJ TV to the continuation of the constituency debate, along with other matters which are on the agenda this evening for Parliament. So we would like to move straight into the agenda as is set this afternoon. Statements by ministers.
Madam Speaker, I know that today might be too early, but can we anticipate tomorrow a report on the damages done by the flood? The Prime Minister is seeking to answer.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, in response to the Leader of Opposition business, a report is being prepared by the NWA, but as you have acknowledged, it is quite early and near to the event. So it is taking a little time to complete. I'm expecting that before this session is out, I should be able to present, if not by tomorrow's meeting.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the House today are the following. The stamp duty amendment of Appendix A to Schedule Order 2022 Resolution. Annual report and audited financial statement of the Jamaica Bauxite Institute Limited for the year 221. The Auditor General's Department financial statements, analysis of public bodies, National Solid Waste Management Authority, and the Auditor General's Department certified appropriation account, head 28,054, for court management services for the year 2016-2017.
Bills brought from the Senate. Bills brought from the Senate.
The following is a message from the President of the Senate. To the Honorable House of Representatives, I have the honor to advise the Honorable House of Representatives that on the 23rd day of September 2022, a bill entitled An Act to Repeal and Replace the Firearms Act to provide more particularly for the prohibition, restriction, or regulation as may be necessary, appropriate, of firearms and ammunition, and for connected matters, was passed in the Senate with 17 amendments, for which the Senate desires the concurrence of the Honorable House. And please see amendments as are circulated. Sign Thomas Tavares Finson, OJCD, KCJP, President of the Senate.
Madam Speaker, the matter for consideration of the Honorable House this afternoon are the amendments moved in the Senate. Thank you. In passing the Firearms Prohibition, Restriction, Regulation Bill 2022. There are 17 amendments, and Madam Speaker, it was tabled on the 9th of September 2022 and debated on the 22nd and 23rd. The Chamber passed the bill with 17 amendments. Amendment to Clause 2 for definition of prohibited weapon to clarify that for the purpose of definition, missile means a weapon capable of self-propelled flight that is designed to deliver an explosive payload. This amendment is thought necessary to not contribute devices such as slingshots to be prohibited weapons. An amendment was further moved in relation to Clause 5 to correct the disparity in the sentencing provision relating to possession simpliciter versus possession with intent to injure. Clause 15. Clause 5 has been amended by removing the imprisonment for life. As a result, subclause 2 is deleted and replaced with the following. A person who contravenes subsection 1 commits a felony and shall on conviction, therefore, before court be sentenced to imprisonment for such term of not less than 15 years or more than 25 years the court considers appropriate. The more serious offense of possession of firearm or ammunition with intent to injure or cause damage now includes imprisonment for life sentence. Provision was, however, further amended to separate injury to person and serious damage to property, to follow for the separate treatment of the offences and the associated penalties. In this regard, Madam Speaker, the penalty provision in respect of injury to person now reflects a penalty of imprisonment for life or for such term not less than 20 years upon conviction before the circuit court. Therefore, a person in possession of any firearm or ammunition with intent by that means to cause serious damage to property or enable any other person to cause serious damage to property shall be liable to imprisonment for such term and not less than 15 years nor more than 25 years upon conviction before a circuit court. Madam Speaker, the Senate recommends an amendment of Clause 19 be made to delete subclause 3b, which provides that if a person surrenders a firearm or ammunition of a type for which a firearm authorization may be granted, then that person may apply for a firearm authorization. In this regard, Clause 19.3, B and 4 have been deleted from the clause. Clause 101, Madam Speaker, was amended to add subclause 4 by replacing the words Director or Chief Executive, as the case may be, wherever they appear, and substituting in each case the word signatory. This will account for the fact that not all ballistic certificates, for example, should be signed by the director of the institute. These changes are really correcting what may prove to be operational inefficiencies that may occur in the implementation of the Act. Additionally, Madam Speaker, let's point out that several clauses, Part 2 of the bill, includes offences being tried in the parish court. However, the legislation did not distinguish whether the trial should be tried summarily or indictable. Meanwhile, the rest of the legislation has other parish court matters being tried summarily. As such, the amendment moved at Clause 101 is the inclusion of a general provision that states where a person commits an offence that is triable within the parish court jurisdiction, for which no mode of trial is specified, provided then that person shall be tried on information. This amendment is at subclause 7 in clause 101. As a result of this amendment, the marginal note has also been amended to be trial, punishment, proof, or record in respect of offences. Madam Speaker, the review period for the bill indicates that clause 113 has been changed to 5 years, which gives us an opportunity to test to see how well the law is working. The truth is, if there will be more trials, we will build more courthouses and provide a requisite report to the prosecution. That's the DPP's office. Madam Speaker, the Senate has also made further consequential amendments to 3 pieces of legislation, to include the Larceny Act by deleting subsection 2 of section 4 and substituting the words in this section firearm and imitation firearm, and have the meanings assigned to them in section 2 of the Firearms Act. The Offences Against the Person Act at item 3 by deleting the words 10 years and substituting thereof the words 15 years. The Parole Act by deleting paragraph A of section 6.4a. Madam Speaker, I look forward to the support of the House in affirming the amendments of the Senate.
Madam Speaker, there are 17 amendments before us, and seeing them for the first time, so it's quite difficult to follow, because what is tabled is the bill as amended by the Senate. That's what's here, and the amendments are the amendments that were made to the prior version. So in trying to see what was changed, you don't actually have the prior text with you to compare it with this. Anyway, I just...
Leader of the Opposition, I don't think it was a change. It was incorporated into this bill. That's what I think.
No, absolutely. So it's, what is here, what was put on the table, is the bill as amended in the Senate. So, and then what is here is the amendments that were made to the bill as passed by the House, which are reflected in here. But it's hard to see what those were, because I don't have the text of what was passed in the House here with me. So it's, you know...
Would you like us to get a text?
It's okay. I'm just asking for a little indulgence in terms of how smoothly I respond to... Because there's one particular issue I'm interested in, which is the amendment to the Offences Against the Person Act, which increased the maximum penalty there. I'm just trying to understand what that was, because I'm not sure what that related to. So I'm just, that's it. The very last, in the amendment to the 7th schedule, there is, so I'm just asking for a little indulgence while I find that. Okay. Item 3. Okay. 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 Yeah, I wasn't sure what it was doing. I think it's just. Yeah. All right. So. Yeah. Madam Speaker, I'm glad that the Senate was able to review the bill in some detail and has proposed these 17 amendments. The most important of them is, of course, the amendment to Clause 5 of the bill. As I had said in my presentation in the House when we were debating it, there was an anomaly in the way in which what we would call simple possession, what lawyers used to refer to as simple possession, was being made subject to a more onerous penalty than possession with intent to injure, which was an anomaly. And that has been fixed by the Senate. It means that, and the way it's been done means that possession of a firearm now, unless they're charged with possession with intent to injure under the Clause 15, unless you're charged with that, the penalty that you would be exposed to under what will become Section 5, which is, as I said, simple possession, is no longer life imprisonment. It was, under the bill as tabled, it was mandatory life imprisonment for possession of a firearm, illegal possession of a firearm. That has been changed and is now possession which results in a sentence of not less than 15 years, no more than 25 years. Previously, it was mandatory life imprisonment without eligibility for parole until 15 years. And of course, parole is not a right. It is a discretion given to the parole board. So whether you get parole or not is not a sure thing for a prisoner. So mandatory life imprisonment for possession was a very extreme form of sentence at the time, and this brings it more into alignment with the rest of the scheme in the legislation. What I do notice is that there's no provision in Clause 5 any longer imposing a minimum period before which you become eligible for parole. And I'm not sure whether that's something that the government may want to have to consider, because in Clause 15, there are provisions relating to that, in relation to possession with intent to injure somebody. 15.2, which is the sentencing provision, provides that the court shall specify a term of imprisonment of not less than 20 years that the person shall serve before becoming eligible for parole. And that's with the mandatory life sentence, which now applies to that. But there is no minimum period before becoming eligible for parole in relation to possession of a firearm, illegal possession of a firearm, or, prohibited weapon as it's described. So this is a very fundamental change because, as we know, one of the most common charges under the Firearms Act is illegal possession of a firearm. And if you were to, the data of the cases coming into the gun court, a large percentage of them are what we call simple possession. Just somebody found with an illegal firearm, you're charged for it. That was going to attract a mandatory life sentence before, and it will no longer attract that. It will be a sentence of not less than 15 years, not more than 25. The parole provisions will apply. The normal parole provisions in the Parole Act will apply, which would allow somebody to become eligible for parole, I think, when they've served 2/3 of the sentence. I think that's the scheme there. So that is important. One thing that I remain concerned about is the way in which the Act refers to offenses to which Part 4 apply. I had asked for that to be clarified when in my presentation on the bill when it was being debated in the House. Because if you look at Part 4 of the Act, it covers a whole range of different things. And it's not clear to me what those words actually mean. But that was not clarified. And I suppose it will come up in the courts as to what those words mean, because there are several places, important provisions in Part 2, which deals with offenses, and also some other parts, but in particular in Part 2, where they use that formulation of an offense to which Part 4 applies, or words to that effect. And it's not clear to me what that really means. And I'd asked, as I said, I'd asked for a provision to be added to make it clear what that is, but that has not been done. So I think the amendment to the amnesty provision is very important because it had, as originally passed in the House, it created a huge loophole where somebody who has possession of an illegal firearm could hand it in the amnesty and then was entitled to apply for a license for it, which was a crazy system, but that has been fixed. And I'm glad that has been fixed. Yeah. So Madam Speaker, I believe that the Senate has improved the bill. I think that there are still things in it that if we weren't pushing so hard to get it passed quickly, it could have still have been improved, and those may result in some further amendments down the road when matters go through the court system and the specific provisions have to be adjudicated on. But nevertheless, as was the case when we were debating the bill in the House here, it has our support. And we hope that the amnesty is successful, and we hope that the bill has the desired effect of reducing the prevalence of firearms in the commission of crimes in Jamaica and provides a strong and effective, we hope, disincentive to the illegal importation of firearms and the illegal husbanding, possession, locking, as they say in Jamaica, of firearms. So that it remains to be seen, but the government has our support in seeking to do that. And this bill does indeed make the risks associated with having illegal weapons, illegal firearms, greater than it was under the existing Firearms Act. And so from that point of view, we think that there's a chance that it will have that desired effect. And it remains to be seen, but we wish the Minister well in the rollout of this, and we are anticipating that there's a review period, I think, of 5 years, and we may have to bring it forward. It was 7 years, I think, and it's been reduced to 5. But with a piece of legislation like this, I think the effects of it will start to be felt, hopefully, fairly soon. So I think that we could probably have that review within a 5-year period. But normally, I think 5 years is the minimum you need to see how legislation is working. But this is essentially not that the changes are about the impact of most of the changes that I'm concerned about are around the impact of harsher sentences on the behavior of our criminal population. And I think we hopefully start to see the effects of that much sooner than 5 years down the line. So, Madam Speaker, the bill has our support.
Dr. Chan.
Thank you for your support, member. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise to support the amendments passed in the Senate to the bill, and would also wish to entreat the Minister, because I know it is not too late to have an amendment to Section 87, where the appeal to the Minister ought to be restored. Because with the country that we have, Madam Speaker, once there's an appeal and it goes to the review panel, it then goes back to the board. So it is the same body that made the original decision. You want to send it back to hear the appeal. And with the way our society is structured, I am still asking that the ordinary citizen should have the right to appeal to his or her minister in these matters. And the second amendment I would like the minister to look at is to amend Section 58, where it covers the process of application for a firearm license, and to ask that just as in 87, where there is a time limit on the appeal, there ought to be a time limit on the processing of the applications. Because just like how you set a time that the appeals must be heard, there ought to be a time that the application ought to be dealt with. But to have persons applying on this long wait for a firearm license while they are exposed to the criminal elements, although this bill, when passed, will correct some of that, but I'm still asking for a time limit on the processing of the application. And Madam Speaker, of late there has been a lot of comments made on a speech Dr. Chang made in Western Jamaica. And there have been comments attributed to Dr. Chang, which he actually didn't say. So first of all, I want to stand with Dr. Chang with the comments he made. Because if a criminal takes up a gun against the police, by the use of force policy, clearly has to use force that's appropriate to dispel that threat. And at the range, there is nobody that goes to a range that I see a hand or a foot on the target. I see a head and a torso. And we spend millions of dollars to train our police officers to hit the head and the torso. So whether he said shoot not to miss or shoot to kill, whatever it is, yes, but we need not to be hypocritical in the execution of what is, because too much protection is being given to the criminals. And if they decide to take up a gun, they must understand the consequences of that action. Yes, sir. They must understand it clearly, and I therefore support Dr. Chang in his comments, whether in the actual comments or the comments that was paraphrased. It is clear, and we must be clear that we send a clear message to the criminal elements, just as how the Firearms Bill is sending a clear message that if you are caught with an illegal weapon, you will be gone for a long time. So I am asking, Madam, if the Minister could consider adding the process of appeal to the Minister's office and Section 58 to put a time limit on the processing of firearm applications.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just before taking the resolution, mentioned to my colleague and friend from St. Mary, the new process for application will now be able to track online, to speed up the entire process, really. So the individual will have access online. In fact, you'll be able to apply online, do your processing, and then you track your process of application online, and you'll not be, unless there's an adverse situation, be very quick and decisive. So we could allow the new application process to operate. In terms of the appeal, I'm aware of the legal advice and the lawyer's differing opinion, but given circumstances emerged from the Firearms Authority recently, I'd allow the 5 years elapse when review. We'll look at the establish what the approach has brought about in terms of changes at the firearm market, really designed to protect the elected directorate, so to speak, given the high level of accusation and counter-accusation inferences thrown at members of the various ministers who have been there, oftentimes without any kind of proof or anything. And given this nature of the site, as they allude to, it becomes not just the honorable discretion of the minister, but then becomes a stick to beat upon the integrity of those individuals there, which they cannot fight against, despite of many review, and even when their review is positive in interest of the minister, in Jamaica, and saying the first word goat is what carry the most weight, and that's what the noise that everybody hears. And at the end of the 5-year period, as the whole approach to the management of the legal industry settles, I think we can look at a number of the issues that can be made more, can be changed and restored to the more traditional means of dealing with firearms application. We thank the member for his comment. Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, I now ask for the consent for the Senate amendments to a bill entitled an Act to repeal and replace the Firearms Act, and to provide more particularly for the prohibition, restriction, or regulation as may be appropriate of firearms and ammunition, and for connected parties to be considered and approved. I indicate, Madam Speaker, a further amendment that the word Queen be replaced by the word King in the enacting clause.
Members, the amendments to the Act has been placed before you. The Minister has spoken. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. The amendments from the Senate are now approved. Members, just be aware of the fact that there are two amendments. The amendments from the Senate and the amendment from the Minister for the words to be by the King and not the Queen. Those are the two amendments. That is why two sets of amendments. So that is why, members, whenever we are discussing, you have to listen. You cannot talk, because if you are asked to approve, you have to know what it is you are saying A to.
So bear in mind, just to assist the Leader of the Opposition, the amendments that were sent back from the Senate we have approved. But a further amendment has been proposed to change Queen to King, and that will go back to the Senate that will approve it. You see, the Senate they did not do that up there. But if they had done that up here, we would have just approved it. But because they did not approve it up there, it has come to us in its original form. So on Friday, and they just approve it. Mm-hmm.
I also have the honor to advise the Honorable House of Representatives that on the 23rd day of September 2022, a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Special Economic Zones Act was passed in the Senate without amendment. Signed, Thomas Tavares, Vincent, O.J., C.D., K.C., J.P., President of the Senate.
Madam Speaker, I now move to introduce and have read a first-time a bill shortly entitled Special Economic Zone Amendment Act 2022.
A bill shortly entitled the Special Economic Zones Amendment Act 2022, read a first time.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice of the second reading of the bill. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing order to enable me to take the second reading of the bill and to take it through all of its concluding stages.
Petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally. Questions and answers to questions.
Madam Speaker, at the expiration of 21 days, I intend to ask the Prime Minister the questions that have been tabled in my name.
Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to sittings of the House. Motions for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained. This is Dr. Donno. Public business.
Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the second reading of a bill entitled an act to amend the Special Economic Zone Act, further notice of which I gave earlier, and also for me to take it through all of its concluding stages.
Members, the question is for the standing orders to be suspended to enable the Minister of State in the Ministry of Industry and Commerce to take second reading of the bill, notice of which he gave earlier, and also for him to take it through all its concluding stages. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Dr. Dunn.
Madam Speaker, the matter before us today is the amendment of the Special Economic Zone Act to ensure its conformity with international standards of tax transparency, as well as to improve the efficiency in the administration of the regime. Profit shifting from one jurisdiction to another is a global problem for which it has been determined that we need a global solution. The global solution proposed by the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, requires that there are increased substance requirements in relation to the treatment of income-generating activities in our Special Economic Zone, SEZ, to ensure that there is a reduced opportunity for revenue leakage locally or shifting of profits internationally. The Special Economic Zone Act is therefore being amended to ensure that it meets these substance requirements, as well as address administrative issues which we have identified. The SEZ is the successor to the Jamaica Export Free Zone Act 1982, which was repealed effective 1st of August 2016. Jamaica SEZ initially passed the test with respect to preferential tax regimes by the European Union in their assessment carried out in 2018. The SEZ regime was therefore the subject of a review by the Forum on Harmful Tax Practices, FHTP, under the OECD in 2020, and a determination was made that modification needs to be made to the regime in order for the SEZ to be compliant with international obligations. The FHTP noted in its review that Jamaica had certain activities operating in the SEZ which would have to comply with substance requirements. These substance requirements are that preferential treatment or tax benefits must only be given to core income-generating activities performed by the taxpayer in the jurisdiction that is usually evidenced by two specific requirements. One, adequate number of full-time employees, and two, adequate operational expenditure to undertake the core income earning activities. It should be noted that the SEZ policy objective was always to increase the productive capacity of the economy, as the development of the regime was targeted at activities with economic substance that will generate substantial employment, provide knowledge transfer and linkages with our local businesses. This requirement, while already existing as a part of the administration of SEZ, needs to be explicitly stated in the legislation. The amendments that are proposed will therefore insert these substantial requirements into the legislation to provide that not only companies from which core income is generated may be allowed to operate in the zone. Additionally, intellectual property activities have been deemed to create increased potential for harm, since there are no special requirements to govern these activities. As such, Jamaica has opted to move these activities from being carried out within the zones until Jamaica creates a fulsome intellectual property regime related to the activities in these zones. There are currently no entities in the zone which will be negatively affected by this provision. However, if such an entity is discovered, a provision has been made in the legislation to allow for continued operation until March 31st, 2023. Further, the amendments seek to expressly clarify that the rate of taxation from distribution by way of dividends paid out of profit is 0. This seeks to concretize the administrative and policy arrangement currently in effect. Further, a few editorial corrections has also been made. The bill clause by clause analysis. Part 1, preliminary. Clause 1, short title and commencement. This clause provides for the short title and commencement of the Act. Clause 2, interpretation. This clause provides for a definition of the term intellectual property activities. Clause 3, amendments of Section 41 of the Principal Act. Section 41 of the Principal Act currently provides a list of activities that are not allowed in the zone. Intellectual property activities has now been incorporated as one such activity excluded. A new subsection 3 has also been inserted to allow for the transitional period expiring March 31st, 2023 for developers or occupants who may be carrying out intellectual properties activity. Clause 4, amendment to the first schedule of the Principal Act. The amendments include insertion of the word business in paragraph 4, subsection 2A and 4, subsection 2E to properly incorporate the word done by business processing organization or operations in the zone and facilitate their receiving benefits of the income tax relief provided. Providing clarification on the rate to be given on dividends paid out of profits derived from the conduct of activities in the zone. The deletion of the word rental earning activities in paragraph 4, subsection 7, and replacing them with the word zone-related activities. To provide that where a developer or occupant wishes to conduct other activities that are not zone-related authorized activities, a new company will be required to be established for those activities. And correction of typographical errors. Clause 5, amendment to the 4th schedule of the Principal Act. The 4th schedule provides for eligibility criteria which the authority applies for entities to operate in the zone. The schedule is being amended to add the criteria that substantial activities carried out by the developer or occupier or occupant of the zone must be its core income generating activities. A provision is also included to provide for a transitional period which requires all developers and occupants operating in the zone to comply with the substance requirements on or before March 31st, 2023. A memorandum of objects and reason clause. Finally, the memorandum of objects and reason clause stipulates the key objectives and purpose of these amendments.
Yes, thank you. Good. Madam Speaker, is it intended to pass this legislation in the House today? If I would prefer if we're given some time to look at this. As you know, this legislation was developed when we were last in government and passed. And it's a major driver of Jamaica's growth initiatives. We're making some adjustments to it which are of importance. Some of them are merely clarifying provisions that may have had in typographical errors or the wrong phrasing, and fully in support of those. But the substantive provisions require some close attention. In particular, I have a concern about the breadth of the exclusion of intellectual property activities. I want to just make this point. Others on our side intend to speak in the debate, and I would appreciate if we could suspend it. But I just want to make one point so you can consider this, Minister. The way in which intellectual property activities are defined essentially means anything that creates intellectual property, whether it be through copyrights or patents, designs, etc., etc. And what we're doing in amending Section 41 is to exclude intellectual property activities from the zones. So a developer or an occupant cannot carry on intellectual property activities. To me, I think that is too broad. I understand where it's coming from in terms of the concern, but any entity that is investing in R&D in a zone is going to be generating intellectual property out of that activity and that investment. So just as an example, you might have a business that is looking at the nutraceutical industry and is maybe cannabis, medicinal cannabis, maybe ginger, it may be castor oil, it may be old man's beard, whatever it is, and they're researching that to produce medicinal products for sale.
Mr. Golding, I'm not sure. Are you?
I'm speaking in the debate.
You're speaking in debate?
Yes.
No, you're
no,
not
seeking
a deferral. Okay.
But I just wanted to. Others have comes. They will speak on the next occasion when we continue the debate. But I just want to make this point so that the minister could consider it before we come back. Those types of investors and businesses will be generating intellectual property as part of their business model, because they may well be looking to license out that intellectual property across the world rather than attempting to manufacture the entire world's supply of whatever product they develop. Just think of what happened in COVID, where various pharmaceutical companies invested and developed vaccines which were then licensed for manufacture in various parts of the world. And Jamaica has tremendous potential in the nutraceutical industry. For example, to develop new products, medicinal and therapeutic products around cannabis and other herbs and spices that we are blessed with that can be revenue generating for the country. If an investor wants to set up in a zone to do that as part of their business model, the fact that they have generated intellectual property. All I'm saying is that where intellectual property activities are ancillary to the main core business activities of the business, that should not be precluded. Because for any business that is investing in R&D or is developing anything new, intellectual property is going to be generated and is going to be commercialized as part of what they do. And we don't want to stymie or preclude that by drafting this in such a way that all intellectual property activities are prohibited in zones. To my mind, that's a very retrograde step. I can understand that you don't want persons to set up in the zone just to be licensing. I know what these people in the OECD countries are concerned of. Somebody, a big multinational, sets up a Jamaican subsidiary, has it operating in the zone, assigns intellectual property to it, and it then now licenses that around the world and is earning revenue on a tax relief basis there from that kind of contrivance. That's what they don't want. That is profit shifting. But where Jamaican persons are investing in actual legitimate business activities that develop inventive things, creative things, And that is part of the output of what their investment achieves. They should not be prevented from doing that in a zone. That would not suit Jamaica. So I'm saying that intellectual property activities that are merely ancillary to the core business activities of the occupant should not be excluded. Some, I don't want to draft. The drafters can do that. Yeah, but the point is, there are intellectual property activities that are going to be ancillary to many types of investment in our zones, and those should not be precluded. Those are not part of profit share, shifting, transfer pricing, or anything of that. Those are necessary outputs which investors are seeking to obtain from taking the risk of their capital in doing things that are new. And as long as, and they should be able to commercialize that like any other business. Otherwise, our zones are going to be hampered and stymied. So I'm just bringing that to your attention, Minister, just to say that, because you didn't draft this. I'm just saying the wording is so tight and so extensive that I think it would be counterproductive. It needs to be subject to a qualification that would allow normal intellectual property activities that are part and parcel of an investor's activities as a business in the zone to be to continue. That's what I'm saying. Thank you.
No, we just want to add something for its consideration as well. Yes, I'm totally.
Yeah. So, Madam Speaker, if the leader of government business is so minded as the leader of opposition has indicated, that we really need some time to look at it, because there are some fundamental issues that are raised. I am in support of that, but I just want to say for the Minister to consider. In addition to the points raised by the leader of opposition, which are quite no, what the one that's suspending?
Right. We asked whether or not the leader of the opposition was making his contribution or asking for deferral. And he did say he was making his contribution this afternoon. Is that right? But that his other members would seek for another day to make their contribution. Therefore, I would ask, right, very well.
That we suspend the debate on this bill until the next sitting of, maybe not, if not tomorrow, next week. Very well. No.
The question before the House is that the debate be suspended until a date to be named. Yes.
Madam Speaker, I'd just like to bring to the attention of the House that there's a time, the 30th, tomorrow? Okay, tomorrow.
Therefore, we are asking for the contributions to make your preparations if you wish to contribute to this debate, because the debate is now suspended until tomorrow afternoon. Very well.
We hope now to continue the State of Constituency debate, and the only contribution today is from the Honourable Juliet Flynn from the great constituency of St. Andrew, West Rural.
Now, Member of Parliament, West Rural, St. Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And yes, the great constituency of St. Andrew, West Rural. Yes, my constituent. Madam Speaker, I'm humbled once again to rise to make my contribution to the State of the Constituency debate on behalf of the beautiful people of St. Andrew, West Rural. This debate, Madam Speaker, allows for us to share the issues facing our constituents, solutions to these issues, and to make proper representation on behalf of the people who sent us here, as is our duty as Member of Parliament. In making my contribution to the State of the Constituency debate today, it would be remiss of me not to thank the many persons who have made it possible for me to stand here. Firstly, I must recognize the people of St. Andrew West Rural who saw it fitting to return me as Member of Parliament for a second term. My dedication and love for the people propelled to a resounding 3,000 margin victory. And so I stand here proudly at this podium today to represent the great constituency and people of West Rural. I must thank my councillors John Myers, Rowan Hall, Tasha Schwab, and my caretaker Abby Hill for the Brandon Hill Division for their commitment and their diligence. my management team and party workers that continue to support my efforts. Also, I must recognize my driver Rambo and my close protection officer Constable Newman, my youth advisor who's right there with the camera, and communication consultant Kajani Williams, and also the staff at my constituency office. To the Most Honourable Prime Minister Andrew Holness, I thank you, sir, for your trust and continued confidence in me to continue my journey and service to the people of Jamaica. To Lavon, my husband and my best friend, and Rock, thank you for your love and support. And of course, last but not least, my beautiful daughter Zara, who of course she asks me from time to time if I'm going to my constituency to see my boss, Andrew Holness. I thank you for all the kisses I get before leaving the house. Madam Speaker, I want to begin my presentation by saying that a party is effective when it has good governance, when it has public input, when it builds capacity, when it represents the people and has good policies. I am proud to say that this government has all the aforementioned. My job as a politician is, my job and our job here is challenging, complex, but most of all, rewarding. And that is why all 63 of us here today, this is why we serve the people. We are the principal agents to improve roads, water. We are fundraisers, we're garbage collectors. We're expected to be the answers to many issues. We are scrutinized by the media, civil society, but we never lose sight that we are here to serve and serve well. Madam Speaker, but after all that is said, firstly, we're here as legislators to make laws for good governance in order for us to build back stronger and allow for growth. I believe we must move forward with our legislative agenda and to make sure that our laws in the books are modern, progressive, and represent the society that we now live in. If we want the laws that will not, if we have laws that will not advance our people, then we suffer as a nation. And so with that, I implore my colleagues and executives again of this House to scrutinize all the archaic laws and to amend them. Madam Speaker, I must also commend the government on the work being done on what I consider two landmark pieces of legislation, the Firearms Act, which we amended today and passed in the Senate, and also ongoing, which I'm a part of that, the Jamaica Teaching Council bill, which is now being reviewed. Madam Speaker, my presentation today will highlight the work we have seen completed since my contribution last year, the ongoing work and the work that is needed for us to see the fostering growth through rural development. As our great country strives for prosperity, rural development must be an integral part of the process. And I am happy to know that this government understands this and has demonstrated the political will to make it happen. Madam Speaker, to allow for West Rural St. Andrew to prosper, focus must be placed on water, road security, access to proper infrastructure. With focus placed on these specific areas of rural development, Madam Speaker, it will allow for growth and opportunities. Let me touch on water. The first area of focus is water, Madam Speaker. A quote from Leonardo da Vinci states that water is the driving force of all nature. It's no secret, Madam Speaker, that my constituency suffers from major water woes. That includes frequent water lock-offs for days and even months, and then communities simply not having access to this commodity. Since I was elected in 2016, Madam Speaker, I have made sure that a priority of mine is getting the people the access that they deserve to this commodity. Madam Speaker, as a representative, it is heartbreaking when you hear your constituents say they have lived for 30 years or whatever the number may be and not have access to pipe water. But I'm happy that this government has recognized the need to get this basic commodity to all Jamaicans, and we are seeing several projects right across the island and also in my constituency. Madam Speaker, in West Rural St. Andrew, we have upgraded just the other day a pump house which will help with water in the Cavaliers area. Also, we will be seeing the purchasing of a new tank for the Cavaliers district, which will see the residents of this area being better served. Madam Speaker, we will also be seeing the purchasing of a new tank in the Mount Airy in the Brandon Hill area to serve the residents there and the surrounding areas like Mount Prospect, New Garden, Mount James, and also in the Mountain Spring area. I am happy to also state that we will be seeing the upgrading of pipelines in the areas of Padmore in the Red Hills district and also Lacey in the Red Hills district. There has been great efforts by the National Water Commission to upgrade pipelines across the constituency, as well as focus on the metering of new customers, and I welcome these efforts. Madam Speaker, last year I informed the Honourable House about an $800 million Essex Hall water project. This, Madam Speaker, is on track and underway. The program of works which has been formulated for the Essex Hall water supply projects includes the development of a surface water source, the transmission of pipelines, storage tanks, and distribution of pipelines. Madam Speaker, I can report that planning studies and preparation of conceptual engineering designs were completed in the last financial year. The preliminary costs for those works were 100 to 200 million, and the NWC has been able to allocate space for another 100 million in its capital investment program for the current financial year. Madam Speaker, full implementation is therefore expected to be complete over a number of 3 to 4 years budget. The implementation program has been staged to maximize use of the early expenditure. Presently, Madam Speaker, procurement documents are being finalized for items 2 and 3, which is transmission and distribution mains. Special care is being taken to ensure that provisions are included to address past challenges related to the price volatility of raw material that we know has been happening right across the world. Madam Speaker, technical challenges related to the detailed engineering designs for the intake work and treatment plant, which is item 1, are receiving special attention at this time. In the interim, the final designs are proceeding for the storage tanks, as well as acquisition of land and easements for various facilities. This has also been initiated. On the completion of this Essex Hall water scheme, it is expected, Madam Speaker, to produce 0.75 million imperial gallons of potable water per day, and this will serve approximately 20,000 persons in the communities of Essex Hall, Salisbury Plain, Border, Unity, Cavaliers, Claypole District, Burnshop, Content, Pinto, and Lacey. Water to all these communities must be a priority for sustainable development. Madam Speaker, I look forward to more communities being upgraded with larger pipelines and consistent water supply. And I commend this government and the National Water Commission Commission's efforts in doing so. Madam Speaker, the second area of focus to allow for West Rural St. Andrew to prosper is roadways. My constituency has a wide network of roadways which are heavily traversed daily in a terrible state. Madam Speaker, I like to say that roadways are the gateways to communities, and with proper roadways, my constituency and constituents cannot reach their full potential. Madam Speaker, I wish to start by applauding my friend, Minister Everett Warmington, for the patching program that has commenced in the constituency. My good friend. We have been seeing patching of several areas in all four divisions: Red Hill, Brandon Hill, Lawrence Tavern, and Stony Hill, and we will continue. I must also thank Minister Warmington, as last year in my presentation, I had mentioned, I said patching. I had mentioned that the Mount Salus to East Kirkland Heights in the Red Hills area, this roadway needed complete rehabilitation, and I can report that this Honourable House, there's an estimate that has been done for this roadway to be fixed to a tune of $103.6 million. Similarly, the Stony Hill to Parks Road has an estimate that was done on that road as well. For full rehabilitation, estimate. Madam Speaker, I can inform this Honourable House that in short order, we will be repairing the wireless station roadway. Farm roads. Madam Speaker, West Rural St. Andrew is a huge farming community, and I would like to thank the Honourable Minister Floyd Green and President Honourable Pernell Charles for the support as well needed fertilizers, farming equipment that was given to my office from the PIP program. A number of farming groups have benefited from these. I also want to thank the Minister for the farm road. What was it, last year, 2 years ago, in the Rose Hall district of Lawrence Tavern. I have to say that shortly, work will begin in Mountain Spring in the Brandon Hill area of another farm road. But let me say that new pipelines were laid by representatives at NWC so work can take place. Madam Speaker, old ladies, young children walk a mile to catch water at a standpipe and walk uphill to their homes. This should not be happening to our people in 2022. Once completed, we will see a new farm road, a new road built, and new pipelines and water in their pipes. This government, Madam Speaker, cares about the people that they serve. Madam Speaker, I face an uphill battle as I've seen several roads in a very bad state throughout the constituency, and we are trying one by one to make sure that these roads are fixed. I want my constituents to know that their complaints have not fallen on deaf ears. I want you all to know that I hear and will continue to lobby on your behalf. There are several of them that I will be bringing to the attention of this Honourable House today. Madam Speaker, I bring a major thoroughfare in my constituency to the attention of Minister Warmington and Minister Clark. This is a roadway stretching from Manor Park to Toms River to St. Mary. As we see work being done from east to west at this time, I'm calling on the government to see to it that make sure that this road is included in the plans for the next financial year to be completely rehabilitated. Madam Speaker, this roadway is a major network and doesn't just pass through my constituency, but connects 5 members of parliament in this House to their constituencies as well. Madam Speaker, I must also bring to the attention of the Minister the following roadway: Belvedere in the Red Hills area, Seaview Road in the Stony Hill area. Let me say, Temple Hall to Border, to Lawrence Tavern Square, and Mount Ogo to Tavern. These are all JUTC routes in need of serious attention. Cassava River needs serious attention. But I must highlight that last week, that a breakaway that undermined this particular roadway in Mount Ogle saw the JUTC terminate their service on this road. So I'm asking for immediate attention to this particular road in Mount Ogle, Lawrence Tavern. I would like to thank Minister Warmington for the response to the 2 breakaways that we had 2 years ago, 2 years ago, where we saw a car going over. Luckily, no one was hurt. Those 2 breakaways were completed a few weeks ago. Thank you, Minister Warmington. Madam Speaker, I know that the pandemic has halted several road rehabilitation projects, but as we move forward, I know that the steady guidance of Minister Clark, this government will be able to get back on track with several projects and work towards improved roadway infrastructure as we build back better. Let me touch on security. Madam Speaker, unfortunately, the crime and violence are of great concern in my West Rural St. Andrew. With that, there's a need for great focus on the area of security, which is necessary to allow for the constituency to prosper. Last year, Madam Speaker, I would have made the announcement that plans were in place to renovate the Stony Hill Police Station. I am happy to now report to this Honourable House that on the 24th of February of this year, our Honourable Prime Minister Andrew Holness broke ground and work is currently underway. Madam Speaker, construction should be completed early next year, and I look forward to it. It will involve the demolition of wooden parts of the existing building and reconstruction of the upper floor. The scope of the work will also include the construction of a new sewage disposal system, paving of the driveway and parking area, erection of the boundary wall, and supply and installation of domestic appliances. This new 2-story, 5,000 square foot building will house the facilities of the station, including living quarters for officers and a holding area. Disabled persons will also have adequate access to the building. This renovation are welcome as policemen and women have been housed in containers for a while due to the deplorable conditions, and I know that they're looking forward to the completion of the renovation. I must also recognize the government for the refurbishing of the Lawrence Tavern Police Station. Madam Speaker, I must thank Minister Matthew Samuda, who at that time was Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of National Security, who visited the Stony Hill area in August of 2021 to get a better understanding of the operations and crime-fighting strategies utilized in the area, as well as to review existing and infrastructure technology. And stemming from the tour, I had informed the House that we would see the enhancement of technology used for security and crime fighting with the setting up of Jamaica Eye throughout the area. Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to report to this Honourable House that since this announcement, we are now seeing the beginning of work for the Jamaica Eye installation in Stony Hill area. Madam Speaker, I ask that our Deputy Prime Minister to see that we don't just stop there, but that we see the installation of Jamaica Eye in all major towns and squares in West Rural St. Andrew, because now more than ever, it is needed to boost crime-fighting capacity of our security forces in all 4 divisions. I also believe, Madam Speaker, that as we continue to improve and modernize these capabilities of the security forces, that we also make sure that we invest in the usage of drones in crime-fighting and surveillance, given the landscape of my constituency. I believe that this would be a game changer for our security forces due to the hilly terrain. Madam Speaker, I have spoken with Minister Chuck, and I'm also eagerly anticipating the start of the well-needed build-out of the Stony Hill Justice Centre. This is important renovation. This is an important renovation so families can be protected. There has been an upsurge in domestic violence, and I believe the Justice Center can assist with the counseling and mediation by teaching better ways to communicate and manage disputes. Madam Speaker, I must commend this Andrew Holness-led government for its commitment to strengthening Jamaica's security forces by providing improved infrastructure, increasing mobility, modern technology, and recognizing that for us to have a safer Jamaica, we must make significant investment in our security forces. Madam Speaker, a major part of fostering growth through rural development depends on access to proper infrastructure. This government has continued to work towards making sure that all Jamaicans have access to proper infrastructure. We continue to make significant investments. This area is very broad and covers from healthcare facilities to housing to garbage collection and renovation of town squares. Madam Speaker, since being elected in 2016, I have made sure that my constituents have access to proper infrastructure, from state-of-the-art, the Stony Hill Health Centre, to Skills Training Centre in Red Hills, the Computer Resource Centre in Rocky Valley, and also Mount James. I have made sure that across all of West Rural St. Andrew, there has been this type of investment. Last year, Madam Speaker, I highlighted to this Honourable House that the pandemic has taught us so much about our health and the benefit of a resilient healthcare system. I continue to commend the government and my Super Minister, Health Minister, Minister Tufton, on unprecedented investment made in improving our healthcare facilities across the island. One such facility, Madam Speaker, is the Lawrence Tavern Health Centre, which treats over 300 patients daily and accommodates patients from as far as Glengough. Yes, 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 you. in St. Mary. I indicated last year that this space is inadequate and is in need to complete renovation. I showed this Honourable House the design for the facility. Madam Speaker, I am pleased to give an update that through Chase and the NHF, this facility will be done over a few budget periods, and looking forward to the groundbreaking next year. Madam Speaker, yes. Madam Speaker, I must express how grateful I am for the foresight of the HOPE program. The housing component of the HOPE program, initiated by the Most Honourable Prime Minister, was a strategic move to develop and improve housing conditions of the country's poor and disadvantaged population. I am proud to say that St. Andrew West Rural has been the recipient of such houses, and keys have been handed over, and I look forward to more of my constituents benefiting from this program. All 63 members of this Parliament have an opportunity to improve the lives of at least 5 families a year. Madam Speaker, I have seen families who have one room, 6 persons sharing that one room. They have no electricity. When you go to their house, they have no refrigerator, no television. And when you go there, they use their telephone, the flashlight, so that you could see in the house. The grandmother, who is a 53-year-old, she has a son, she has a daughter. This daughter, Madam Speaker, is severely depressed and stays in bed all day long. She does not get out of bed. She has 3 children. She has a 10-year-old, she has a 14-year-old, and this 14-year-old, Madam Speaker, has cerebral palsy, and a 16-year-old. And I'm proud to say that this 16-year-old, despite all of those things, he was a valedictorian at his high school, passing 7 subjects, Madam Speaker, and will attend 6th form this year. This grandmother is the sole breadwinner for this family. Honourable Prime Minister, I am asking for assistance for this family. They do not own the land they live on, and I need them to be relocated somewhere that there's government land. When the opposition speaks about you handing over one house, it hurts me to the core, because families like this benefit from housing that we are handing over to constituents. This one house will benefit 6 persons in one family. This government cares. Madam Speaker, let me thank the Honourable Minister Samuda for the annual poverty intervention program. With this, I'm able to help so many families. I do believe, however, that there are many families who are not on the PATH program who should be on the program. Madam Speaker, there is that need for more social workers. 2 social workers is not enough to man a space of 25,000 people. More social workers are needed to help us overcome poverty, educational issues, mental illnesses, and a varied abuse in Jamaica. With this, I'm asking for this area to be prioritized for us as a government. Madam Speaker, as it relates to our town squares, Lawrence Tavern and Stony Hill both need attention, with them both needing to be completely reconfigured. Last year in my presentation, I highlighted the initiative that would see the development of 5 town squares across the island to the tune of $600 million. I've chosen the Lawrence Tavern Town Square as one to be developed. And I understand that due to the pandemic, there were setbacks. But I know that Minister Mackenzie will see to it that work begins soon. The square is congested and is badly in need of reconfiguring. So I look forward to what's to come for the people and the business of Lawrence Tavern. Madam Speaker, the Stony Hill Square. This also is in need of reconfiguring to allow for proper flow of traffic in the mornings, in the afternoons, and in the evenings. And I have to say, thanks to Minister Mackenzie, I was able to improve the drainage. It was really looking terrible in the square of Stony Hill. And I was really able to improve the drainage system in the Stony Hill Square. I can also report, Madam Speaker, that currently the Stony Hill market is going to look so fabulous. It's looking good already, Minister Mackenzie. The Stony Hill market located in the square is now being renovated, and I must thank Minister Mackenzie and my councillor Tasha Schwab. As well, I know that they are changing the steps. Work started last week on the steps, Minister Mackenzie, and it's really looking good. I make sure I visit on a weekly basis to see what is happening, and I'm very pleased with the work so far. Madam Speaker, last year I indicated that the basketball netball court at the Rocky Valley complex needed resurfacing. I can report and say, thanks to Minister Grange and the SDF, it has been resurfaced, and this past summer we were able to host a netball and football competition, and so Minister Dunn, we're coming for you next month. Madam Speaker, I'm also pleased to announce that I have partnered with Heart Stony Hill, which will see Heart providing short courses that they're going to be offering to constituents. These short courses will be in the areas of digital literacy, higher learning, assessment recognition, basic computer training for community members, and customer service. Madam Speaker, this will begin in October of this year, which is in another few weeks, at the newly refurbished Rocky Valley Community Center, where I outfitted this center with 11 new computers through my CDF, and we also got free Wi-Fi connection from Universal Service Fund. Madam Speaker, I want to express that garbage collection is one of the most challenging problems I face in St. Andrew West Rural at this time. It is a twofold crisis, Madam Speaker, where we see residents and businesses not properly disposing of their waste, in which they create illegal dump sites because garbage...
Madam Speaker, I now ask that the standing orders be suspended to enable the Minister to continue her speech to its conclusion, notwithstanding the time limit on speeches.
Members, the question is that the member be given sufficient time to complete her presentation. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it, member.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I continue. Madam Speaker, as I said, the garbage collection is a challenge at this time. But we have different reasons for the challenge. Persons dumping illegally, and of course the shortage of garbage trucks. I must acknowledge the work that this government is doing in acquiring several garbage trucks, and we will be seeing those 50 in December, right? And I know that Minister Mackenzie will be sending some up to West Rural St. Andrew. Madam Speaker, alongside more trucks, I have implemented and, of course, dedicated building some garbage skips to make sure that the garbage is not just thrown on the roadways. These garbage skips, Madam Speaker, will be, we have already had some down in the Boone Hall area, in the Golden Spring area, in Lawrence Tavern, and another will be put in the Cooper's Hill area. I have made attempts to address this issue in the past using my Christmas program, of course, from the Sanitation Fund. But, Madam Speaker, this requires a long-term solution. Madam Speaker, I believe it is now clear that this honourable House, that for West Rural St. Andrew to prosper, focus must be placed on water, roads, security, and access to proper infrastructure. And I know that this Andrew Holness-led government will see to it that special focus is placed on these areas to allow for rural development. Madam Speaker, I would like Madam Speaker, I would like the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance to consider an increase in the CDF. The countless letters for higher learning, have grown over the years, Madam Speaker. We see engineering, law students, medical students who wish to pursue higher education but are unable to fund their education and write to us as members of Parliament. This year's allocation, Madam Speaker, by the Minister of Finance of an additional $3 million assisted more families with uniforms, school shoes, and school supplies. Madam Speaker, I was able to assist over 500 families in total. One grandmother, Madam Speaker, unfortunately, she's now taking care of 7 children because her daughter died. Wow. And even though the PATH program is taking care of those children with assistance of back to school with that additional $10,000, Madam Speaker, this additional funding that we got from Minister Clark really assisted with that mother. Madam Speaker, as I close, I want the people of West Rural St. Andrew to know, no matter how challenging the task is, I stand committed and will continue to lobby on their behalf. Work will continue throughout all 4 divisions in West Rural St. Andrew. One by one, I will get the job done as their Member of Parliament, working to address the many issues which affect us in this great constituency of St. Andrew West Rural. As I make this presentation, I hope for action for the issues of my constituents to be heard and reflect in the budget. I believe in this government, my Prime Minister, his cabinet, along with our bright members of Parliament, to steer us on the right path forward. I believe in my people, and I know that this Andrew Holness-led government can lead this country to prosperity, and definitely we can build back stronger. Thank you. Thank you very much. Will.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank the member who has made an excellent contribution to the debate, but I now ask that the debate be suspended.
Members, I want to thank the member from West Rural St. Andrew for an excellent presentation. But I'm going to caution all of us as members. We are speaking of our fellow parliamentarians to refer to Standing Orders 35.6, which specifically says you are not to mention your colleagues by name. Refer to them by their constituencies. Thank you so much for an excellent presentation. I now ask for the suspension of the constituency debate for this afternoon. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. The debate is suspended.
Madam Speaker, I now ask for the recommittal of the following items on the agenda: announcements and notices of motions given orally.
Members, the question before the House is that there is recommittal of the items on the agenda, announcements and notices of motions given orally. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. House Leader. Announcements.
Also laid on the table of the House today are copies of the Government of Jamaica fiscal policy paper for the financial year 2022-2023, interim report dated 27th September 2022.
Notices of motions given orally.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I'll move the following motion: the Stamp Duty Act, the Stamp Duty Amendment of Appendix A to Schedule Order 2022 Resolution. Whereas by virtue of Section 30, subsection D2 of the Stamp Duty Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, the Minister may, by order subject to affirmative resolution of the House, amend any or all of the appendices to the schedule of the Act. And whereas on the 23rd day of September 2022, the Minister made the Stamp Duty Amendment of Appendix A to Schedule Order 2022, and whereas it is desirable that the Stamp Duty Amendment of Appendix A Schedule Order 2022 be affirmed, now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable House of Representatives as follows. This resolution may be cited as the Stamp Duty Amendment of Appendix A to Schedule Order 2022 Resolution, and the Stamp Duty Amendment of Appendix A to Schedule Order 2022 is affirmed. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I'll move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion.
Public business.
No. Before, one more motion. Notice of motion given orally. I'll come. Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following motion. Be it resolved that the Government of Jamaica fiscal policy paper for the financial year 2022-23 interim report dated the 27th day of September 2022, which was laid on the table of the House on the 27th day of September 2022, be referred to the Public Administration and Appropriation Committee for consideration and report. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I'll move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion. Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
Members, the question is for the standing orders to be suspended to enable the acting House Leader to take the motion, notice of which was given. The Minister of Finance to take the motion, notice of which he gave earlier. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, the House will recall a few weeks ago, I think it might have been before the recess, that the stamp duty order 2022 resolution was brought to the House. And that would have been upon the customary change in the common external tariff regime. There were just some errors that were made or omissions, and this order here, which is an amendment order, seeks to just correct those. And it refers to certain categories of goods that are listed in the order. It is mainly administrative, and it's just a result of those omissions in what was passed a few weeks ago. So, Madam Speaker, I would ask if there are any other.
Madam Speaker, the Minister said they are mainly administrative corrections. The opposition doesn't have any issue with what he's proposing.
So, Madam Speaker, I now ask that the motion be approved.
Members, the question before the House is that the motion brought by the Minister of Finance be approved. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. Motion approved.
Madam Speaker, we're still in public business. I move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion on the interim fiscal policy paper referring it to the Public Administration Appropriations Committee, the notice of which I gave earlier.
Members, the question before the House is that the Minister take the motion, notice of which he gave earlier in relation to the fiscal policy paper for the year 2022-23. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. Minister.
Just a point of notice, Chairman. The PAC needs to look at the fiscal.
Madam Speaker, I've just moved. Thank you. I move for the resolution to be accepted.
Members, the question is that the resolution be accepted. Those in favour?
And
those against? The ayes have it.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. Hopefully a date can be set in short order. That's okay, Madam. Madam Speaker, is not proposed to do any further business today, so I now move that the House be adjourned until tomorrow. No? Wednesday, the 28th of September.
Members, the question before the House is that we do adjourn until tomorrow, Wednesday the 28th at 2 p.m. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. This House is now adjourned.